My wife hit a $9 million jackpot, filed for divorce, and kicked me out of our home. But the part she forgot, the prenup her parents forced me to sign, changed everything. I'm 35 now, just an ordinary guy from a working-class family. My childhood was simple, a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, the smell of detergent clinging to freshly folded clothes, and dinners that always brought us together at the table. Life wasn't fancy, but it was steady. After high school, I bounced around between jobs. Bartending, helping out at my uncle's hardware shop, later managing a sporting goods store. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was steady, and I earned my way honestly. My wife's world couldn't have been more different. Her parents lived in a reality I'd only ever seen on TV, multiple homes, shiny new cars, and those over-the-top parties where champagne never stopped flowing. Her dad, let's call him my father-in-law, was one of those men who didn't need to raise his voice to dominate a room. He had this way of turning simple remarks into veiled commands. Her mother, the kind of woman who could cut you down with a single raised eyebrow, was no less intimidating. They never openly insulted me, but their polished smiles never hid the disapproval lurking just beneath. When we got engaged, their fear of outsiders suddenly became clear. To them, I wasn't family material, I was a potential threat to their fortune. Before we could even set a wedding date, my father-in-law slapped down a demand: sign a prenup. I didn't have the money to fight it. Honestly, I didn't even think about fighting it. I was blinded by love, repeating to myself that this was just a formality, a piece of paper to satisfy them. Love was supposed to be enough, right? I still remember the day I signed. The sun was pouring through the giant windows of their estate. My father-in-law slid the thick contract across a mahogany table like he was closing a business deal. My mother-in-law handed me a cup of coffee with that ever-so-polite smile. My fiancée, my future wife, just stood by quietly, saying nothing. That silence stung more than I admitted at the time. The terms were straightforward but strange. Anything she inherited, or anything from her family, stayed entirely hers. But assets we acquired together, lottery winnings included, were considered marital property. Odd wording, but I brushed it off. I wasn't marrying her for money. 6 months later, we had a beautiful lakeside wedding. My parents, humble as they are, were stunned by the extravagance but tried to hide it behind smiles. I remember my dad's tight expression as he shook hands with my in-laws. He'd always told me, trust your gut. I didn't listen. I thought love would override all doubts. For a couple of years, things seemed fine. We moved into a condo her parents helped us buy. The down payment came from them, but I covered the monthly mortgage. At the time, I thought it was generosity. Now I see it for what it was, another way to keep their grip on us. At the time, I brushed it off as just how wealthy families acted. If her parents wanted to swing by with new furniture, repaint a wall without asking, or rearrange our living room like it was their personal project, fine. I figured that was the price of marrying into money. But deep down, it gnawed at me. Whenever I complained, my wife would shrug. That's just how they are. They're trying to help. Help didn't feel like the right word, but I let it slide, until the day that changed everything. She called me one afternoon, voice trembling with excitement. You won't believe this. I just won the lottery. $9 million from a random ticket she'd bought at a gas station. For a second, I felt like the luckiest man alive. I pictured us quitting our jobs, traveling, maybe finally building a life that wasn't under her parents' thumb. But almost immediately, the joy began to sour. She became secretive, almost paranoid. She insisted we couldn't tell anyone, not even my own parents. She started setting up meetings with lawyers I'd never heard of. When I asked to come along, she waved me off. You'd feel out of place. That stung more than I cared to admit. Then came the real gut punch. I came home one evening, exhausted from work, and found her with her aunt rifling through drawers. She didn't even look nervous. She just turned to me and said flatly, "I'm filing for divorce." I thought I misheard her. But no, she wanted me gone. She told me to pack my things, that the condo was under her name, and that I had no claim. I reminded her that I'd been paying the mortgage every month. She brushed it off, saying her father's down payment and her new fortune outweighed whatever I had contributed. I can't describe the feeling. It was betrayal, sharp, humiliating, final. My hands shook as I called my dad, trying to explain through tears that my wife had just kicked me out of our home. And then came the twist that turned my despair into resolve. Her father had sent his personal lawyer to handle things. Their plan was obvious: shove me out the door, wall off the lottery money, and erase me from the picture. But they overlooked one thing: the very prenup they'd forced me to sign years earlier. Buried in that contract was a clause that said any windfall acquired during the marriage, like lottery winnings, counted as marital property. The same prenup they thought would protect her family was suddenly my shield. If she pushed for a divorce, those millions weren't hers alone. I knew I had to tread carefully. My dad was the one who pulled me back from the edge. He told me, "Stay calm. Get a lawyer who isn't tied to their circle. Don't let them steamroll you." So I stayed a few nights with my parents. My mom was furious. She'd never trusted my in-laws, and now she was spitting fire about how they treated me. My dad, always the steady one, kept his cool. By the next morning, he'd arranged a meeting with an old friend who specialized in family law. Sitting in that lawyer's office, I spilled everything: the prenup, the sudden lottery win, the divorce papers waiting to be served. He skimmed the prenup and actually laughed. "They screwed themselves," he said. "They were so focused on locking you out of her family money that they forgot about joint assets. Lottery winnings. That's joint. Unless a judge does something bizarre, you're entitled to a major share." Hearing that felt like someone had thrown me a lifeline. For the first time since she told me to leave, I wasn't drowning, I was ready to fight back. My lawyer was upfront from the start: this was not going to be a smooth ride. My in-laws had money, connections, and a history of getting their way. He warned me they'd likely unleash an army of lawyers, but he also reminded me we had one huge advantage: the prenup. Add in the fact that I contributed to the marriage financially and had been literally thrown out of the home I shared with my wife, and suddenly their position wasn't as airtight as they wanted me to believe. I asked him how long a divorce like this could drag on. He told me a contested case might take months, maybe longer. But, he added, if her side realized how weak their footing was, they'd likely push for a quick settlement. He also said not to be surprised if they tried intimidation first. He didn't have to say it twice. Within days, my father-in-law left me a voicemail that could have been pulled straight out of a mob movie. His words were icy, measured, telling me I didn't deserve a penny, and if I didn't back off, he'd make sure I ended up with nothing. I played it for my lawyer. He just shook his head and told me to save every recording, every letter, every scrap of proof. Then my mother-in-law took her shot. She showed up outside my parents' house like some villain in a soap opera, acting as though she was doing me a favor. She offered me a laughable sum, framing it as generous, but it wouldn't have even covered half of what I'd paid into the mortgage over the years. I told her no. Flat out. "See you in court." Her face twisted in disbelief. She wasn't used to anyone pushing back, and my refusal clearly rattled her. That's when the games escalated. My lawyer filed motions to freeze the lottery money, making sure they couldn't shuffle it into hidden accounts. That set off a storm. Suddenly, my in-laws were whispering to anyone who would listen that I was a gold digger, that I preyed on their poor daughter, that I was milking her fortune for myself. It cut deep, hearing that about myself. But I wasn't about to let their lies rewrite reality. Even my job wasn't safe. My father-in-law tried to get my boss at the sporting goods store to fire me. My boss, a gruff old-school guy who'd seen through plenty of blowhards in his time, told him to shove it. That kind of loyalty only fueled me further. Some friends sided with me, others muttered that I should just walk away. But every night, lying awake at my parents' house, I replayed everything. They thought they could push me out of my own life with threats and lies. Not this time. After weeks of back and forth, we finally had a court date. My wife didn't show her face. Not once. She stayed glued to her parents, hiding behind her legal team, as if I were some stranger who didn't even deserve eye contact. Her lawyers painted me as a parasite, someone who'd given nothing to the marriage. But my lawyer came prepared. We laid out every receipt, every payment I'd made, every line in that prenup. We reminded the judge that I hadn't just been left, I'd been forcibly locked out of my home while my wife's family circled the lottery money like vultures. The judge didn't decide right away. Instead, he ordered both sides to get ready for a full hearing on the division of assets. That didn't stop my father-in-law from trying one last round of intimidation. He called my boss again, ranting, trying to ruin me. My boss called me into his office, slammed the phone down, and told me to keep fighting. It was surreal. I was exhausted, humiliated, angry. But underneath all of that was a spark of determination I hadn't felt in years. Because, for once, the law wasn't stacked against me, it was quietly sitting in my corner, thanks to the very prenup they thought would bury me. The date for the big showdown was set. Motions piled up, accusations flew, and I realized something important: they weren't scared of losing money to me. They were terrified of losing control. If my in-laws thought they could shove me into a corner with scare tactics, they clearly forgot who they were dealing with. I had a trail of proof, receipts, bills, bank statements, showing I carried my weight in that marriage. Maybe I wasn't rich like them, but I paid utilities, bought groceries, even chipped in on the mortgage every single month. My lawyer and I dissected every word of that prenup. Buried in the middle was one sentence that changed everything: all financial windfalls, including but not limited to lottery or game show winnings, shall be considered marital assets unless expressly designated otherwise. It was like they had built their own trap and handed me the key. A week before the big hearing, we had a status conference. My wife showed up flanked by her parents and what looked like half a law firm, for attorneys plus some slick financial advisor. They strutted in like they owned the place. But the smugness cracked when my lawyer calmly slid the prenup across the table and read out that exact clause. The judge barely reacted to their excuses, just ordered all major assets frozen until trial. That one order shut down any chance they had of whisking the winnings into some offshore account. Outside the courthouse, my mother-in-law cornered me. She tried her usual act: smooth voice, fake smile. Said we should talk like adults and offered me a lump sum that was laughable, even less than the joke of an offer she'd made before. She called it generous. I called it insulting. I told her straight that I'd let the judge decide. Her mask slipped then. She hissed that I was destroying her family, as if I was the one who filed for divorce after winning millions. The hypocrisy was enough to make me choke, but I bit my tongue. My lawyer had warned me, stay calm, don't give them anything to twist. Meanwhile, I knew my father-in-law wasn't about to play fair. We got court orders in place to block any big transfers, and my lawyer even lined up a forensic accountant in case they tried stashing money. That must have rattled them, because the old man left me another venom-filled voicemail, calling me vile and blaming me for sucking the love out of his daughter's life. That one I saved too. As the hearing drew closer, I prepared like my life depended on it. My lawyer drilled me to keep answers short, let the documents speak louder than emotion. We built a file thicker than a phone book: prenup copies, bank statements, receipts for the mortgage, even text messages where my wife admitted we split bills. The morning of the hearing, I stood outside the courthouse, palms sweaty, heart pounding. My parents came along, steady as ever, waiting outside once I walked in. Inside, I spotted her instantly. My wife sat stiff beside her father, both faces carved from stone. Her mother stood at the back, arms crossed, watching me like a hawk. Their legal team looked sharp, confident, probably believing money and polish could outweigh facts. The judge entered, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s. She didn't waste a breath. She had each side present. Her lead lawyer started with the usual character assassination, painting me as a hanger-on, a guy who lived in her orbit but barely contributed. They insisted the lottery ticket was her personal purchase, made with her own money. My lawyer let them talk, then calmly set the record straight. He pointed to the prenup clause that called out financial windfalls, lotteries included, as marital property. Then he dropped the hammer, bank records showing the winning ticket had been bought with our joint account card. That one piece of evidence shifted the air in the room. I saw it ripple across their side, the financial advisor whispering furiously, the attorneys shuffling papers, my father-in-law's jaw tightening. The judge looked over her glasses and asked them flatly, "Do you have any documentation proving this was a separate transaction?" Silence. If my in-laws thought they could twist reality with lawyers and threats, the courtroom showed them otherwise. They scrambled, fumbling excuses, claiming the lottery ticket had been bought with her father's money, or that the joint card was used by mistake. But the bank statements didn't lie. Both of our names were right there, printed in black and white. The judge's expression hardened. She didn't even need to say much. Her silence said it all, she wasn't buying their story. That was when my wife finally cracked. She stumbled through a shaky explanation, admitting she hadn't even consulted me before running to lawyers. She confessed her parents pressured her into hiding the winnings, into filing for divorce, into cutting me out. She tried to dress it up as protection, saying she didn't want the world to come after us if people found out. But the damage was done. When my lawyer calmly asked if she'd ever once sat down with me to discuss it, she admitted no. The disappointment on the judge's face was impossible to miss. By midday, it was clear, the very prenup they had forced on me years earlier had become a double-edged sword. Instead of shielding their fortune, it locked the jackpot inside the marriage. The judge openly said she was inclined to treat the winnings as marital property subject to equitable division. Outside the courthouse, my father-in-law brushed past me, muttering through clenched teeth, "This isn't over." But for the first time, he didn't sound invincible. He sounded rattled. The weeks before the final ruling, their desperation only grew. They filed motion after motion, begging the court to reinterpret the prenup as if lottery somehow didn't count. Each motion was denied. My mother-in-law cornered me again, warning that I was breaking the family apart. I told her flat out, "You broke it the moment you threw me out like trash." My wife left tearful voicemails, begging for a private arrangement, saying she didn't want things to end this way. Maybe once, long ago, I would have believed her. But after the lies, the ambush, the eviction, I was done being played. My lawyer told me not to engage, and I listened. Finally, the day came. The courtroom was tense, buzzing with lawyers, advisors, and family on both sides. My parents sat quietly in the back, their presence steadying me. My wife's side came armed with suits and smug looks, but their confidence had cracks. Her lead attorney tried one last Hail Mary, painting me as an opportunist who only discovered the prenup loophole after living off their generosity. My lawyer dismantled that narrative with 3 simple points. They forced me to sign the prenup. The prenup itself explicitly included lottery winnings as marital property. I had proof of contributing financially, and evidence that they tried to cut me off the very moment the money hit. Then came the verdict. The judge spoke firmly. The lottery winnings, she ruled, were unquestionably marital assets under the prenup. She criticized my in-laws for twisting the very contract they had drafted. She also found my eviction from the condo unreasonable, entitling me to reimbursement for the payments I'd made. I walked out of that courtroom knowing I had won. Not just money, but my dignity. My father-in-law's face was thunderclouds. My mother-in-law whispered furiously at him. My wife? She stood there with tears streaking her face, regret, anger, shame, maybe all 3. In the weeks that followed, they tried floating a smaller settlement, hoping I'd take less to end things quietly. But we had no reason to bend. We finalized the ruling as it stood. The only concession I made was giving up the condo. I never wanted to step foot there again anyway. When the check finally arrived, it wasn't the full jackpot, but it was more than enough to start over. Enough to help my parents renovate their old home, enough to invest, enough to live without fear. And here's the bitter irony, the prenup they shoved in my face to keep me powerless turned out to be the very weapon that guaranteed me justice. Their arrogance cost them millions. My wife still lives under their roof, her reputation cracked, whispers chasing her in every social circle. As for me, I went back to a simpler life. No fancy cars or mansions. Just peace. Freedom. And the knowledge that I stood up for myself when they tried to crush me. They started the war. But I finished it.